Welcome to After School with Mr. Van Huss. Today I'm sitting down with a freelance writer. He's done a little bit of everything in his career, including a lot of sports writing, everything from UT Vols football to the independent wrestling scene. He's also an old friend of mine from high school. So not only do I get to hear some cool stories today, but I get to catch up with an old friend. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend, Mr. John Moorehouse.
After school with Mr. Van Huss. I'm here today with an old friend of mine that I actually went to high school with, Mr. John Moorehouse. John, it's so good to see you, buddy.
Hello.
Welcome. I appreciate you sitting down with me today. I'm going to let you tell everybody a little bit about your career and kind of what it is that you do so you can kind of introduce yourself to everybody watching.
So I'm currently a freelance writer. I have been freelancing as the primary means of my income since the spring of 2011. So coming up on 14 years. And as a freelance writer, I have done all kinds of things. I have ghostwritten books. I've edited books. I've done sports journalism, which is a lot of what I do, a lot of my background, I guess. I've done content marketing. I've done public relations stuff, social media marketing, written for very small projects, written for big companies. I've done technical writing, all kinds of different things.
That's awesome.
Requires a lot of adaptability. You got to be organized. You've got to be able to make deadlines, and you got to be willing to learn things kind of on the fly when you're freelancing. You don't want to, in my opinion, like pigeonhole yourself into one area or one type of writing. If you do that, you're denying yourself other potential income streams. I feel like that was a really long answer, but that's what I do.
That's what I'm looking for. And I know in stuff like that, especially when you get into some of the freelance stuff, it takes a long answer because you've got your hands in a lot of projects, a lot of times all at once. So I know it can be quite the workload when you get into it. Now you were telling me you spent, I think, 7 seasons covering UT Vols football.
I did. So we went to high school, of course, at Dobbins Bennett back in Kingsport.
Go Indians.
And from there I went to UVA up in Charlottesville. Went there fully anticipating I was going to be a lawyer and go pre-law, and came out a sports writer. They had a paper up there, a student newspaper, and it was a pretty big deal, and got the chance to do some stuff, really enjoyed it, and just dove wholeheartedly into that. I had a job lined up at the Kingsport Times News back in our hometown before I graduated, so that was nice. And jumped into that, did high school stuff and a lot of in the office stuff, and then the opportunity came up in 2004 to start doing coverage of Tennessee football. And at that time, we did almost every game. Those first few years, there were a couple of road games that were like far away. When they went out to Cal, we didn't go. But most road games, every home game, news conferences every week, like early in the week with Philip Fulmer and players. And I was there. These are all names that your kids are not going to recognize. I was there for the end of Fulmer, and then the 1 year of Lane Kiffin, and then the first year of Derek Dooley.
I've got some that'll know exactly who you're talking about.
So that was when I was there. Okay. So it was a very interesting time.
Yeah. A lot of changeover right through there in Vols football, I know.
Yeah.
Before you got into your field of work, like before you started writing, was there anybody that like stood out as like a hero to you? Were there like any writers that kind of got your attention and kind of influenced you to want to do something like that?
When I was in college, UVA, it's near-ish to DC. So we got the Washington Post, like in the dorms. We just got like one subscription. And so like Tony Kornheiser and Michael Wilbon were the big columnists then. Before they were on TV on ESPN every day, they actually wrote for a living and wrote columns in the newspaper. And those were two guys I definitely read. I actually got to meet Wilbon at an ACC basketball tournament when I was a senior. I was a junior, yeah. that was pretty cool. He was a very cool guy. Those were two of them. Of course, I read a lot growing up, so high school and college. So I like all the classics, I guess you would call a lot of them, like Faulkner and Hemingway and Shakespeare. Liked all them. Stephen King, of course. But really didn't get into like really reading and following sports writers, I guess, until college, which sort of preluded me going into it as a means of living.
All right. And you said when you went to college, you started out as like pre-law. What did you like get your degree in? Like, what did you finish up as?
I have a double major in English and history.
Okay, very
But
cool.
I joke that I spent most of my time in the basement of Newcomb Hall at the newspaper. So that just meant that I was assigned a lot of books that I either did not read or read very quickly.
Gotcha.
Or skimmed, because from, I guess, the start of my junior year, well, in Virginia, it's third year. They don't do that. The freshman is first year and senior is fourth year, and most places don't do that. But from the start of third year on, the paper was like my primary thing that I was into.
Okay.
Which, of course, you got no credits for. It was just a thing that you did, but that was my thing.
Yeah. And that's one thing I try to get across to my students is there'll be things that you'll do, especially in college, that you may not get any credit for, but it's just the life experience you get from doing it and just the real world experience you can get from doing it is probably more valuable than any credits you could possibly be working toward anyway.
Sure.
Did you have a favorite teacher or professor in high school or college or anything that kind of stood out to you that pushed you in that direction?
So college too, that jumped out, it really didn't have to do with journalism, but there was a really famous and popular economics professor up there named Kenneth Elzinga, and he would have like macroeconomics, and he would have it in this huge lecture hall, and it was a really popular class. And I got to do a history class on civil rights taught by Julian Bond, and that was a very cool experience. High school, that's a long time ago. That's so long ago.
Getting longer every day.
I can't think of anybody right off the top of my head as far as writing and stuff that jumps out now.
Yeah.
I remember Jeopardy and Mr. Hoover's AP history class. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I don't think you and I,
or writing in general.
Yeah. I don't think you and I had very many classes together. You were probably a way better student than I was in high school. I think we had band together because I think you were in band, weren't you?
Yeah, a couple of years.
Yeah, that's where I was.
I quit before my senior year, so yeah.
Okay, I was in it freshman and sophomore, and I stopped like after the Macy's trip because I felt like that was the best it was ever going to get, and moved over to Shumply after that. Yeah. A lot of people hung in for that Macy's trip, and then
yeah, I'm out of here.
Yeah, it was fun though. You also talked about, you were telling me how you covered some things like independent wrestling in the Southeast. Like, what's that like?
Okay, so I've loved watching wrestling since I have been about 10 years old.
Which is something we've had in common.
And have made no attempts to hide it. You know, people are like, ooh, wrestling, I don't care. I like it. I'm going to AEW in Knoxville. I got tickets for my birthday. Going next week. In my time at the paper, there were two guys that worked for the news side, the wrestling column. They would rotate. They'd take turns. Like 1 week, the first guy would do it. Next week, the other guy would do it. I was asked if I wanted to join the rotation. At the time, I'm doing UT football. I'm dealing with angry UT fans via email. Also, I wasn't the everything great, go Vols all the time writer, which my predecessor was. Mm-hmm. So there was some adjustment there. So I was concerned, given the feel people feel about wrestling, it's gonna hurt my stance with the UT stuff. So I adopted a pseudonym and went and bought a La Parka mask, look him up, and put it on a dress shirt, and I was the mayor of Parts Unknown. In the column, when it was my turn, I was the mayor of Parts Unknown. And I would try to write it totally differently, totally different style. It was sort of like, if you'll remember this, like Hoople, who did the football picks, with Hunter S. Thompson, but about wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doing that every 2 or 3 weeks for a few years. And then one of the local promoters wanted to do a 24/7 hardcore title and have me like present it and like present it to the bad guy or the heel and then hit him and then pin him. And then I was the champion or whatever. And that sparked some off and on stuff where I just got to know a bunch of the people and was involved with it. Was the on-screen commissioner for one place, for a couple places. Did commentary, that evolved into doing commentary for a while, and then left that to just go do other things. And then me and my wife, we adopted our girls, so that took precedent. I mean, in 2019, I did some shows up in West Virginia for a company, and then once COVID hit, they were pretty much done. So I've done commentary, I've done like the commissioner thing, I've helped out in the back with like interviews and stuff. I've even got to help like plan out stuff and book stuff, which of course I love that. I got to do lots of different things with that. I met some really cool, like some of my best friends are from that time. She's still to this day.
That's very cool. So you've obviously done a lot of cool stuff and had a lot of different kinds of experiences. Is there one life lesson that you would pass on to high school students today? Let's even say you could go back and talk to yourself in high school. What is one thing you want like the next generation to know when it comes to doing something you love, when it comes to chasing your dreams, just how to live life? What's one thing you think they need to know?
You got to be bold. At some point, you've got to be. The way I got my start at the paper, I was at home on break, and I walked into that office, not knowing anybody, and asked for the sports editor. And I was like, "Hey," they introduced myself. It's like, "Hey, here's some of my clips. If you have any work this summer, I'd love to be involved." And ended up working part-time for him the whole summer. And then that was parlayed me into getting the full-time job. Every freelance client that I have is also in some shape, form, or fashion the product of networking. It's someone I know who either was involved or knew the person that I needed to talk to or that sort of thing. It's very difficult, I think, to just go out, oh, I'm going to put my stuff on Indeed or on my clip site and hope somebody's going to notice me and send cold applications. That might work some, but the world, in my opinion, even today, it's about who you know, and it's about cultivating those relationships, and you never know. The most lucrative thing I've ever done and probably will ever do money-wise was a technical writing thing, a technical writing contract job. I was making $65 an hour at one point, 40 hours a week. Of course, it's contract, so it's temporary. The person who hooked me up with that is someone I met who runs a wrestling message board. And he does that technical writing stuff as his full-time job. So you never know where those contacts are going to happen. One of my longest running clients, I worked for a horse racing magazine for 15 years. And that started because I knew one of the editors from playing World of Warcraft with them. Like, you never know where those connections are going to be. So just stay open to those connections and be willing to, take your shot when something opens. I will also say, well, every client I've gotten has pretty much been through networking. That just gets you in the door. Like, you got to do the work once that time comes. You've got to show you can make the deadlines and give the client what they want and all of that. And also always do business on some sort of contract, because if you don't have like a written document with like the terms of what's going on, there have been several times where I have gotten sort of screwed over because it was based off email or a text or something, and then I wouldn't get the money that I was supposed to get. So, importance of networking: do the work when you get your foot in the door. Always have a contract.
That's all good advice. That's all things that I've seen in my time also that will definitely help you out. So hopefully anybody that's watching definitely pay attention to that, because that's three great things to know. John, buddy, I appreciate you sitting down and talking with me and sharing some of your experiences and your advice. Hopefully I'll maybe see you here in a year or so at the 30-year reunion. I'm sure somebody's getting that up somewhere. So hopefully we'll cross paths. But I greatly appreciate you sitting down and talking to me, and we'll probably talk soon.
All right, sounds good.
All right, thank you.